Okay, the CBRC meeting of April 27th has started and convened. Do you want to call the roll, or should we just go ahead and proceed?
I think we could proceed. I think a couple more folks are going to be coming in shortly. So
it's my understanding we have a public commenter tonight. Is that person in the green room?
They are. Yep. If we're ready for them, I can move them over.
Go ahead.
All right. Beth, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You should see something on your screen here in just a second. Hello.
Good evening, Beth.
Hi there.
CBRC doesn't have frequent public commenters, so we follow the same protocol that the board does when it meets. Would you please state your full name and then spell your last name at the beginning, and then the clock will start. You have 3 minutes to make your public comments.
Thanks so much.
Please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Beth Cavanaugh, Cavanaughh. My pronouns are she, her. I'm here today because in prior years, the CBRC has called on PPS to examine the inequities of local school foundations. However, as of 2020, CBRC dropped the issue from its reports, despite that local school foundations in the PPS board foundation policy has still not been reformed. We ask that CBRC include a section on the need for local school foundation policy reform. The PPS board is currently examining foundation policy reform via the policy committee. Our group proposed that a district-wide foundation be created so that private funds can be raised to pay for FTE for the district, and the funds would be distributed in accordance with the RESJ policy and PPS's core values. PPS funds, foundation funds, are supplemental to PPS's equitable funding model. This is why the current policy is not equitable. Furthermore, allowing the wealthiest and whitest schools to fundraise for FTE disincentivizes them to advocate at the local and state level for increased public funding. Under current policy, hundreds of hours are spent holding foundation auctions and other fundraisers to raise, at the peak, $4 million for the district, most of which remains at the schools with foundations. This parent time and energy needs to be redirected toward advocating for increased public funding. I believe that that the previous reports, 2019 and 2018, were included in an email that was sent to you on this topic by my colleague, Suzanne Clark. But for reference, couple quotations. From 2019, CBRC is concerned that the district's focus on equity may be undermined by the lack of transparency and accountability for independent school foundations. Many schools with independent school foundations are raising significant revenue to further enhance learning experiences and opportunities at their already enriched schools. The impact, unintended or not, is that opportunity and achievement gaps between students attending schools in wealthier communities and their less affluent counterparts are exacerbated despite the district's efforts to level the playing field. In 2018, CBRC said, independent school foundations are designed to expand resources within the district. However, the current funding model exacerbates inequities. The highest fundraising schools are typically schools in higher income and higher wealth neighborhoods. Sharing 1/3 of the funds after the first 10,000 across the district does not ensure equity because the current redistribution is still so heavily skewed toward the fundraising school. We direct the board to make the distribution of foundation funds more equitable and eliminate fundraising loopholes. So just a couple of past reports to as a starting place. So we ask that you revisit that topic in your current report. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Beth.
So our task tonight is to go through our draft report. And I was just talking with Jordan and was reading the comments, and I in general think they're very good. And I think maybe in the interest that we have one member who has already indicated that he has a short time frame tonight. let's see if we can't go quickly through the suggestions as they appear in order on the screen. So let's see. I thought I had them right there, but I got the Zoom thing.
Roger,
here.
Lisa has her hand up.
Okay, all right, Lisa.
Hi, so I just thought, instead of going through comment by comment, Roger, I thought, because I think a lot
can't
of
hear
people,
you.
I can hear you. I'm not
can
sure.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, better.
Okay. Instead of going comment by comment, because I don't think a lot of people have added their sections yet, or
Okay.
so I think some have, some haven't. So what I thought is tonight is to go through kind of, if we agree on the observations we talked about last night or the other night, like if those are what we're going to hone in on, and then to walk through and just look at some of the bullet points from last year and see whether they even apply or not, to get rid of rid of anything we don't need, and then kind of focus in on, again, like the themes that we talked about the other night, and who can take the assignments from those.
I
If
have
that
no
works for
quarrel with
everybody.
what you're suggesting.
Okay, so if we just talk about the themes and observations the other night, the first one, and I put this in just so everybody could see, but the first one was declining enrollment, and then the subsequent decreased funding. And then I know Stefan had put in some language regarding, what that means potentially for decreased positions and whatnot. So if everybody's in agreement on that, I think that would be one we can focus on. And I don't know if anybody has, doesn't want, to focus on that. Maybe that's if people can raise their hands, or if anybody has an objection to that one being included.
Can I just say one or two things about this topic?
Okay, go ahead, please. I'm trying to wrestle with screens here. So it sounds
Can
like
you hear
Peter.
Uh-huh.
Stephen, is it Stephen that's speaking?
Yes.
Okay, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
I don't know if people had that. I think I have some relatively general comments for this, and I just want to point them up, and I just feel like I want to just quickly talk through them because I don't think I necessarily expect everyone to have the same opinion. So just to make everything transparent. So just to want to say with enrollment, and one thing what Roger said last time, at the last meeting, I explored a little bit. Enrollment declined unevenly across school classes. So high schools actually saw a slight increase. Enrollment dropped a lot in elementary schools. I think what that means, and I think you see what the projection is, if that remains like it, you see some sort of like bigger cohorts graduating out, and then smaller cohorts like the kindergarten and elementary cohorts kind of sustaining through. So that's why you see that sort of continuous enrollment decline there. So I think it's consistent with that, but I also think it's some sort of, you might think like, oh, we'll see like a rebound on the enrollment side, and that kind of pattern speaks against an easy rebound. So I want to highlight that, and I highlighted that there. There's a couple of recommendations that can come out of that. I think I put two in, but it's like I'm really just wanted to just some sort of like start the discussion around that.
Responses?
Right.
Yeah, thanks. I think actually that is the key point to pull out here, in addition to kind of our assessment of where our current money is going, is really that long-term trajectory. I think kind of our other subsequent observations around facilities and the increase in liability there and so forth are really kind of secondary.
Hi, this is Grace. I have to leave because I am joining another, I have a conflict with another meeting. So I'm going to try to hop back on if this one ends early, but I just want to let you all know that I'm signing off for now.
Okay, and Grace, I saw what your pieces that were added. So thank you for putting those in. And I know a lot of yours was on the staffing allocation and a few other things. So we'll make sure that those get pulled into it as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, that's really my lens, being a staff member, working with kids
appreciate
every
it.
day. So, all right, thank you.
Did anybody else have
Okay,
anything?
Mariah, you still have your hand up, but is that no longer the case? Mariah? So who's speaking now? I guess I can't see.
Nobody's speaking at the moment. I think Mariah just has her hand up from the last time.
Okay.
Okay, so if we move on to the next point, which was what brought up of kind of the equity versus equality last time, and looking at staff allocations and how it's being applied across different schools and whether it's really meeting the schools most in need. And so I know there was discussion on that last time, and I'm not sure if we have a lot of narrative around it, but maybe that's one that we can assign for someone to focus in on, if everybody agrees that that's kind of a one that we're going to highlight. Deshelle?
Yes. Are you referring to the section about the 100,000 for the and then the SCIP that goes along with it?
I'm just going through right now, but that probably, and I think we need to go number by number and really see if these apply.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to get a better understanding. But if that is it, then I did already add in a paragraph, I think probably not in the correct section, but I wrote it off in a comment of like the observations and then the recommendation for that particular part, if that's what you're referring to.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay, I see yours. Yeah,
and then I also make mention. Yeah, and I also make mention of the foundation aspect, like that was kind of brought up in the public comment. Within that same paragraph, I touch on it a little bit, but we can expand on that as well.
Great, thank you. And I'll pull those in as well. And I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to look at this closer to the meeting today. And then it was, I think the other is the school improvement grant allocation, use and transparency. And maybe Deshelle, I don't know if some of your comments were related to that too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that might be it with the school, like the school improvement plan and the $100,000 grant like distributions, but it also had like a little bit tied into like the school foundation resource allocations as well. Like, so perhaps that's, but I wrote some stuff on that if that's what we're referring to.
Deshelle, I wonder if you could elaborate. I haven't had a chance to look at your comments in the draft in terms of what you're adding around the foundation piece.
Yeah, so in the budget document, it talks about how if schools use a certain amount of money from the their school foundations, then they can't use it towards FTE, or they can use it towards FTE. It's kind of strange. So we talked a little bit at our last meeting about the inequities there, because not all schools have those an ample amount of resources. And so I think that then also ties into some of the things that are being highlighted in the public comment about the inequities in regards to the school foundations as well. So I kept it pretty general because I didn't know how much we wanted to expand upon that, but I know we did at least touch on it a little bit at our last meeting.
Well, I just want to weigh in here on this piece, and I have to say there's a lot of disagreement in the PPS community, and I'm very hesitant to take a strong position on the foundation piece. I mean, I think the real concern is that, yes, some of the schools that are raising a lot of money, they're getting to keep 2/3 of that. But if the allocation has changed significantly, they'll just lose revenue and everybody loses.
And
I think that that's not settled. So I would be hesitant to say a whole lot on that.
And I would
Yeah,
say,
I don't actually bring it up. I don't really touch too much into it. I'm just like basically reiterating the sentence that's in the actual budget document.
right. And I think that's the thing we need to keep in mind is that CBRC can talk about the budget and about the ESSER stuff, but the foundation stuff isn't part of the budget. And so CBRC's role is budget focused. So I do think talking about those ESSER dollars and questions about that is fine. But I think, and limiting foundation comments to what is actually outlined in the budget.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
I would
exactly
like
what
to
I
have
have
that
in there.
removed.
Well, that's exactly, I took the exact line from the document and that's what's in there verbatim about the foundation and about the resources and then also the bullet points exactly in the budget.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so again, I think some of the, I'll sort through what's been added and kind of plug it into some of these themes we're talking about, and then we can come back and revisit it. The next item was alternatives to the MAPS testing. And I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to address that. And I think I did see some comments on it.
Yeah, so again, that is related to board goals. So the board goals is measuring proficiency. So we need to make sure that we are using assessments that is measuring student proficiency, that is connected to the board goals.
Can I, Mr. Cruz, can I ask a question about how that is related to the budget? I mean, I'm not saying that that's not an incorrect assessment or something that needs to be addressed, but are you questioning the money we're spending on MAPS? Is that where how that intersects with the CBRC work?
Yes, exactly. So I looked at the current contract that we have with MAPS, and it's a little bit over $1 million. And I feel like that can be redirected to something that is more comprehensive that will get us towards our board goals. Case in point, like the example that I used, we already have current assessments already in place that this Oregon Education Department have set in place. For example, like the performance local tasks. That is a Division 22 requirement, but the district is currently out of compliance administering those particular assessments. And that is a great way to actually measure proficiency. So if we are in compliance and using those assessments that the State Department already has in place, then I feel like that would be a lot better investment because we're not spending money and we're also in compliance with the state.
I guess my question, Karanja, is is there a cost associated with going to the testing system that you're talking about that the state has?
No, there's no cost associated with administering the test. The only cost that I can probably project will maybe be the time that the teachers will use, but the time assessment is associated with instructional time. So if you look at a lot of time that Division 22 requires us to use for instruction, well, assessment is tied with that.
Mariah?
Yeah, I guess I'd be a little hesitant to make that recommendation right now because MAPS is really in its second second year. And also my understanding of the map testing is that we're measuring proficiency, which gives a different metric, or excuse me, we're measuring growth as opposed to proficiency, which gives a different and more refined metric. So I think we could inquire about it, but I don't feel comfortable recommending against it at this point, especially not knowing kind of the whole process, just personally not knowing the whole process that went into that recommendation. And I know it was an extensive process to look at curriculum.
Okay, so again, the argument is the connection with the board goals. So my whole argument is everything needs to be aligned with the board goals. So I'm trying to explain to you all, I'm an educator by trade. So I'm giving you this lens from an educator perspective, that the MAPS assessment is not measuring proficiency, which is not connected to the board goals. So therefore the recommendation could be, we can use more alternative assessments to be able to measure student proficiency so we can connect it to the board goals. So I'm going to continue to push back. So unless you have an argument that can support connecting to the board goals, then I would be all ears.
Olympia.
Yeah, I would just say as a student, I think I completely agree with Karancha, and that first of all, we're out of compliance, which is problem number one. And it is more connected with our board goals, and it's a better, it's fiscally cheaper. So I think I would just say I agree.
I'd only comment that we've been out of compliance with 22 for quite a number of years. So maybe Ailey can answer why, but
Well, I just want to speak to the fact that MAPS testing also is it's twice a year. It's actually supposed to be 3 times a year, but we don't do it the third time because that's when we do the Oregon State assessment. But MAPS is also used for teachers to help monitor growth throughout the year. So you get a baseline in the fall, you see where your students are, and then you see how they've grown to the winter. And so it can help people make adjustments. And what we see with MAPS is a really good indicator of where people are going to wind up at the OSAS, which is the proficiency. So it's used as part of a way to help refine instruction and get supports to students in need. So while MAPS does measure growth, it's used as a tool to help teachers tailor so that proficiency can be attained. So as we talk about, the ultimate board goal right now is proficiency. We've gone back, it used to be growth and now it's back to proficiency. That's a tool, a strategy of helping students get to proficiency. Some people like it, some people don't. It's like the foundations. There's lots of opinions in PPS about either one. It's the current strategy that the senior leadership has chosen to try to support instructional success.
So again, so if you were at the last meeting when I asked Dr. Adams how it connects with instruction, you can go back, I believe it's on record. So the example that I gave, like we are assessing using MAPS, assessing within an 8-week window frame. So within that 8-week window frame, the curriculum that is being taught to the students is not the same standards and strains that MAPS is assessing. So if I'm a teacher and I'm doing the 8 weeks of instruction and I focused on math operations rather than algebraic expressions, now my 8 weeks is focusing on those particular standards and content areas. Now, if I do the assessment within an 8-week period, MAPS is going to assess algebraic expressions, operations, geometry, even though I haven't taught geometry, even though I haven't taught algebraic expressions. So there's no way I'm able to use that data to be able to measure growth if I'm not if I haven't taught that. So the curriculum that is adopted is not aligned with what is being assessed with MAPS. So basically we're just testing for no reason. And we're not using the data that can help better instruction. So if you go back and listen to what Dr. Adams stated, it's not supposed to be used for instruction. It's a standardized test. It's a norm reference assessment. So the standardized test is only to show the growth within the 8 weeks, but within the 8 weeks, the instruction of algebraic expression was not taught within the 8 weeks, even though I'm being assessed. Does that make sense?
So I think the fundamental question here is MAPS is a tool that the district is using. And as the CBRC, your recommendation is around the budget. So not around, I think you ask a lot of really good questions there, Karanja. But is that $1 million, is just, to say in your report, we have concerns about how money is spent on testing. So I think that tying it back to that is the place where the CBRC can weigh in.
And that is my recommendation. So the recommendation as it relates to budget, as it connects to board goals, we can better use that money to connect it with board goals. So as I explained to you, and as no one can really answer those questions because it's not fundamentally being able to, you can't implement that because it doesn't exist. It's like you're comparing apples with oranges. So we're just wasting $1 million. So that is budget related. So the recommendation is, where can we redirect those dollars that can help us get us to our board goals, which is proficiency based, not growth.
I feel like we need to move on here, and I'm wondering if we can call a vote on this as to whether to include something that specifically speaks to redirecting MAPS funding or not. Could we do that?
We can, and I agree that we need to move on. I was just going to say that I'm willing to express our concerns as to the monies that are being allocated for testing, but not going much more beyond that. But I guess let's vote on whether we wish to do as Karanja is encouraging us to do, or to modify it in some manner. So all those in favor of following Karanja's recommendation, say aye.
What? Oh, can I just, I don't want to vote on that. I think everybody has a voice here. And I'd like to at least talk through these issues and see how things get raised. And then, because I know last year we had a differing set of opinions, and we at least addressed that in the report, that I don't think it's out of our purview to say we recommend that they look at alternative testing. But if we're going to vote on it, I'm not going to vote on that, because I think we're discussing issues right now, and I think everybody should feel free to express their opinions as we go through that. And then I think
nobody's being cut off in expressing their opinion. I was only trying to accede to the effort to move on. And if you don't wish to vote, then let's do that, and let's move on. Then we'll move on to the next subject.
One thing that you could consider is a discussion around whether this is a consensus report or if it is something that, as I'm looking at the comments, just because I'm seeing a lot of this, folks are kind of split on, whether or not you all need to agree on everything, or if there's room for varying observations and recommendations. But I just throwing that out there because it seems like it's getting stuck on.
Jordan and I have talked about this before. I don't agree that let's just say historically the report that CBRC has rendered has been a consensus report. The only violation of that was last year when we had one member go off the rails and express individual points of view. And if we want to do that, then we've got 18 points of view or whatever our number is at the present time. And I don't know that that's extremely helpful for the board in its work. So
And I'm trying to get an understanding of why we're voting and why is the issue that I'm bringing up being argued. So it feels like trolling. It feels like undermining, especially if I'm presenting facts and information and connecting it to our board goals. It just seems very ironic sitting here as a Black man.
Yeah, I wanna second Grant on that. Like,
Sorry, there
I
are
wanna
hands
take
raised.
credit.
Can we please respect the hands raised? Sorry, thank you.
I had my hand raised for like 3 minutes, but okay, I can raise it and then wait.
can't see it, this, what the problem is. So go ahead. Steve?
So I'm pretty sure that it was Alana, Mariah, and then Stephen. But I could be
This
wrong.
board, okay, thank you. This committee has never voted on whether or not to include the voices of the people on this committee. So I don't think that we should start doing that now, unless we're going to agree on that at the very beginning of the committee. Fill me all.
Steve?
So I'm not an educator. I think if I hear an educator on this committee make a point that seems reasonable, and then I have another person on committee supporting that, who is a student who has experience with that, I think like to me, it sounds like something that I would like at least see in this report, because it reflects some of the committee members' perspective. And I think that there's plenty of space in these reports to voice different opinions. I think mine would be perhaps something like, this seems a concern. We'd like to know more about it. We would like to know why the board has chosen this kind of test. That's kind of my question, right? Why do that? Is it a high value? Is it a high value? Right? I mean, you make more tests, like, yeah, we're showing more stuff, but is that really worth since all the money spent? But, at a first stance, I think like this seems like a reasonable point to me, being, as I said, not someone who's versed in that, but like hearing that argument.
I would just add that I think we're getting caught on $1 million. And I think I want to make sure we're cognizant of, the scope of the budget and making sure we're not getting too in the weeds. So we can, there are a lot of things in this budget, and this is a very small element of it.
Well, I find what Steve said is I can concur with that, but I can't see everybody's hand up, so I see there is a hand up on the screen, but I don't know whose it is. Mariah says let's move on. So she doesn't want to vote, and so let's move on. So the next subject, please.
Oh, I see.
The next one was the use of one-time funds to support FTE and what is the long-term strategy. I think everybody had a concern about, we're using some gap funding for this year, or funding to address the gap, but that there's going to be issues down the line, and what is the long-term strategy? And this again is just our observation, and we can talk about recommendations, but just, does everybody agree? Is this something that we want to highlight in our report? And maybe some people, yeah.
When the budget was presented on Tuesday night, those ESSER funds referred to some 80 plus FTE. That's use of one-time funds for a long-term effort of our program. So that was the concern that was expressed by the group earlier, and Lisa is reminding us that we need to address that concern.
I would also say I would appreciate if we added language just saying around expectation for changing results, especially around lowering the achievement gap with the use of one-time funds. And like, you know, are we expecting to see that over 1 year? And if we don't see that over 1 year, are we expecting to cut programs and then cut staff? So I think that would be my one thing I would add.
Okay. I just made a note in here for myself. And then the last item was kind of the overriding school property maintenance needs. And I think, Roger, I know that's been an issue of yours. It's been all of ours.
I still have difficulty hearing what you're saying. You mentioned my name and I heard that part. What's the subject?
School maintenance.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm concerned about as I've stated earlier, we asked for an estimate of what the deferred maintenance was. Last year, we were told 600 million, and this year we're told that it's in excess of $1 billion. So that's a $400 million increase, roughly. So if that is the annual increase, we're rapidly exceeding what an average bond measure is on deferred maintenance. Then if you look at one of the charges that the board has adopted for the Bond Accountability Committee, it's to ensure that the maintenance of remodeled and new schools is maintained. And I know from personal experience working as a volunteer at Franklin, there are work orders that are as old as the occupancy of the new building. So.
Okay.
I'm concerned that this is a ticking time bomb. If the board is intending to go out for the next bond measure to remodel the two remaining high schools, which happen to be the Ida B. Wells, formerly Wilson, and Cleveland High School, that voters are maybe legitimately going to be reluctant to do that.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody has anything to add on maintenance.
Well, Mariah mentioned it in concurrence when we discussed it previously. I don't know whether she wants to say anything now.
I mean, for me, I think it would just be an inquiry as to, you know, why we're seeing either a reassessment of how they're assessing maintenance that led to this large jump, or, you know, kind of what the conditions are around that. I don't think I have a recommendation out of it, just simply an observation that it's a growing liability.
I noticed I submitted a bunch of comments about the Q&A thing. I don't see where Jordan has had opportunity to incorporate those, but in that there is a discrepancy. The superintendent in his proposed budget refers to 81 schools. The response to received from staff on the Q&A speaks about in excess of 200 schools or buildings, counting portables and so on, 70 some odd portables. There seems to be a discrepancy. then the question about are any buildings leased? And the answer was none. And obviously, that's not correct because profit itself is a portion of it is leased to Multnomah County. So, I'm willing to move on, but those are my concerns.
Okay.
Just so you know, Roger, your observations and recommendations are linked at the bottom of the report. I didn't want to plug them in because there was a lot of stuff going on in here, and I didn't want to mess anything up. So
Yeah, that's fine. I'm having screen difficulty. I can only see portions of stuff. So.
Stefan, I see you're.
Yeah, just a comment. I think a possible recommendation here might be that the board could include projections about the liability for the future. Would be good to see that perhaps.
Essentially, I'm just saying, what is the long-term plan to address these things? Don't give me the step, strategic planning. That's the eventually I have all 85 schools or whatever the number is remodeled in the year 3000 or whatever. So, Lisa, do you want to move us to the next subject?
Yeah, so that's kind of the themes that we talked about the other night, but then I thought we can go through each of the points from last year and either remove them or assign them or kind of how they follow back into some of our observations and what we're going to recommend, if that's a good use of time, or if we all agree that these are the themes we're going to focus on, then maybe we can talk about who. Yeah, I guess I haven't had time to review everybody's comments to kind of see where they fall in these themes, and so yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the best use of time is for the remainder. And if we walk through like bullet, each of the items under observations from last year, we talk about how the budget demonstrates substantial support for the 4 board goals, and then kind of what the key focuses were, which was improving class size, reducing the impact on schools experiencing large K-5 enrollment losses, and a few other things, and I don't want to read it verbatim, but I think again, like, are we making this statement or not? And people don't have to comment on it now, but maybe that's just something to think about. The second one was kind of the application of critical analysis from staff of budget changes with the specific lens of the racial equity, social justice process. And, again, do we want to comment on this as kind of an overriding? I know Deshelle the other night, we talked about looking at if we define the themes and observations that maybe under each, we talk about how they're meeting the goals. And this to me is like an overriding all of that is the racial equity and social justice. So again, how do people feel about, do we want to keep this comment in there? And then do we want to change or add to it? And we don't have to do that now, but again, just want to kind of get a sense from people of
So Lisa, are you asking for us to, if we want to keep that in there?
Yes, and I'm thinking we do, but whether there's, we kind of want to address it for this year because a lot of this is written for last year. And so I just want to make sure it's still relevant. And then are there other points we need to add in here? Maybe that's a better way to say it. And
I'll defer to the group because I gave my comments during the last meeting, so I'll let others.
Okay. If no one has any comments, then what I would just suggest is if there are people who have comments or suggestions of if we want to add anything to that, please feel free to do so.
I'll add some in. My concern though is like, will we then be questioned on if this is like, if we start adding comments in there, are we getting in the weeds? Is that something that we're going to be told like it's outside of what we are supposed to be doing for CBRC in alignment with racial equity and social justice? I just want to be sure before I start like editing that is okay for this year.
I mean, I think as it affects the budget, right? So last year was the staffing, and I think it's relevant. And I think observations, we have to, some of this is observations and it's recommendations for the budget. And
yeah, and that's how I've been writing. So I'll just continue doing it that way. And then if you all want to edit it, then after, then feel free.
Okay, great.
Lisa, this is not particularly on your question, but let me ask the question. We received a report and suggestion from the CBOs, as did the board, and the board's discussion of the proposed budget the other night. The CBOs testified again in public comment that they're asking for a $2,700 appropriation in addition to, and to come out of the Student Success Act allocation. And that seemed to receive some receptive response on at least a couple of board members, maybe all, I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm whether we're so disposed to accede to their request or not, in that we have in previous years weighed in on the board allocating more funds than is the state formula. I'm wondering if we ought to at least address the fact that we have received this request and we concur or we don't concur or whatever, however we wish to deal with it. But
so Roger, that's number 6 in here on in the recommendations. But again, this is from last year. And so if that's something you want to address, it's number 7, or I'm sorry, it's number 6 in our recommendations from last year.
I'm trying to scroll down to, I'm getting numbers. Oh, okay, here it is. I find it. So anyway, it might be reworded to acknowledge that we received that request and we concur or we don't concur, or we leave it up to the board to decide or however. But I just thought we ought to maybe acknowledge that we did receive the request.
Okay, do you want to add that in here as a comment? Not tonight.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that if you want to. But I want to get the groups. Do you wish to say we agree with their request, or that we urge the board to consider carefully the request that's been received.
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't following you asking us to comment on that, or you're,
I think we should acknowledge that we received the request. Other than that, do we urge the board to consider favorably, or do we ask them to consider the request and decide accordingly? So are we recommending that that we concur with their request, or do we want to punt the ball into the board's hands to let them decide the matter? I don't care, or we can ignore even mentioning it if you want to. Apparently, no one has an opinion, so let's move on.
let's see here. Again, I don't know how valuable this is to go line item by line item, because I don't want to,
Okay, well, Lisa, are you proposing that we continue to issue our comments and by a certain deadline you compile it into a report, or are we asking for another meeting, or how do you see us proceeding?
yeah, I guess maybe we can scroll through this real quickly, because I do want to get a sense for it. I think it's becoming confusing of what was written last year and what are we proposing for this year. So maybe if we can just scroll through these real quickly. I see someone added something in the kind of the footer that's adding to all the pages. And so it's becoming, at least what I'm looking at. So I'll take that out. But if we look at number 3 in the observations, it's talking about, we believe the board and superintendent have attempted to craft a budget that is focused on investing in historically and presently oppressed students, specifically Black and Native students. In addition to the continued allocation of equity funds and student Success Act funds, the proposal to target federal relief funds to summer acceleration programs focused on the high needs population is welcome. And I think we did talk about this a little, of how the summer program and some of the FTEs we're applying this year cannot fully address the growing needs. So maybe again, do we feel this is something, maybe we can tag it on to kind of one-time funds versus longer term to address what we know is going to take longer than a year. And maybe that's the question to ask here.
I'm fine. Do you want to add that to, you want to take that responsibility?
I can, I'm happy to, and maybe other people can comment on it too, but if it seems like this is still something we want to talk about, and maybe we change it more towards kind of the longer term, how are we going to address some of the, acceleration programs and whatnot. I'll just ask that people comment on it so we can.
Listening to the board's discussion after the budget was proposed Tuesday night, it seemed like there is concern within the board about using one-time funds, but in the end, I kind of think they concluded that, yeah, they're going to have to use the one-time funds, but there wasn't any clear delineation that I felt for how this might be addressed in the future. But anyway.
Okay. The next one was the equity allocation of 8% of the staffing model at targeted schools has held steady We continue to support this investment and approach and note that the visibility in the budget book volume 2 is a valuable tool to demonstrate transparency to the community. However, only providing school level staff allocation lacks the transparency into intended uses and accountability outcomes that we wish to see.
And then I see that there's a comment, let's expand on this point. I'm not sure who made that, but that may be the limitation of my screen at the moment.
Yeah, and I think too, just to remind everybody, it would be good when it's make sure to sign in. So when you make comments, we know who to ask follow-up questions to, because a lot of there's a few in here that are anonymous, and I know I did the same this morning and had to remind myself to log in to make sure that we know. Next is we acknowledge that the district continues to face significant challenges created by the pandemic and its lingering effects on enrollment, facilities, academic and social and emotional needs of students. The medium, long-term enrollment trajectory and budget implications of declining enrollment are especially concerning. We urge the district to continue to take a do now build approach, which can help the district emerge stronger and healthier there. So again, for this year, kind of the equity focused activities such as high dosage tutoring, small group instruction, extended core instructional time and specific grades. Okay, so we are addressing, while we recognize these one-time funds will soon end, we support investment to assist with catch-up, especially in reading and math proficiency, and maybe we can talk about more longer-term approach. The next was proposed reductions to central services are concerning and unsustainable given this current state of our schools. So this focuses on custodial positions, cafeteria staff. Is this an issue we want to highlight this year? Stefan?
Yeah, I just want to comment that when I looked at the FT allocations, I saw, and I put that in here, I saw a bit different pattern here comparing 2018-19 to 2023 as an increasing custodial staff FTE. I think it might not be like, it might not have fully addressed the amount that's required, but at least there seems to be an increase. But that's I don't know whether I'm interpreting the numbers correctly.
Okay. And then the next was kind of what we talked about earlier. CBRC acknowledged the importance of a suite of assessment instruments that help paint a complete picture of student social, emotional, and academic well-being. Such assessments should be conducted in balance with periodic review of grade level curriculum and varied approaches to ensure PPS is reaching all students and abilities. And so maybe Paranja, this potentially could be, and I think there's another area where we talk about, maybe it's in the recommendations in that first one there of the testing and what you were talking about, what we all were talking about earlier about proficiency versus growth, and so I'll just leave it at that. So then moving on to the recommendations. We talk about recommend additional investment in middle school mathematics, English language arts, and other enhanced learning opportunities, especially for our BIPOC students, to ensure students are reaching high school and graduate readiness. While all students have been affected by the pandemic, the most impacted students were at the middle school level and among Black, Native, and Latinx students. Based on the most recent MAP testing data, the proposed targeted investments of one-time federal fund may increase progress towards this goal. So I think we need to kind of update this for the current budget year. Next was we recommend that PPS continue to advocate for protecting and increasing the K-12 budget for Oregon school districts by achieving the quality education model. And again, is this something we want to focus on for this year? I believe we may have talked about it the other night, but
I might note that for the first time in many years, PAT was in Salem lobbying the legislature about QEM. It's also my observation that over the years, since it was first adopted, I believe in 2006, that no governor has ever proposed funding at the QEM level, nor has the legislature ever enacted the QEM level of funding. So right now, or at least last year, the gap was like $2 billion. The QEM was that much greater than what was legislatively enacted.
So do we feel like we want to make a point here, but maybe we can just summarize it in a sentence or two?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay. Third, we recognize that the current budget makes assumptions about the state of the school attendance, and we talked about that of enrollment. So I know we'll touch on that. We recommend continued investment in recruiting, supporting, and retaining student-facing employees of color. And I think, again, I know last year we were asked, so I do think we want to address that, and maybe other people could chime in on that as well. Stefan?
I guess
Yeah, just to weigh.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to weigh in here again with a special ad. I think that was one of the fastest growing category in terms of FTE over this 5-year period. So I don't know how to interpret that. It's either a good investment and addresses needs. It could also reflect higher needs, and so kind of show some sort of signs of stress. But I think we need to, I think when we have this language, we need to make sure that it's consistent with whatever we write up there in terms of like changes in FTEs or changes in staffing, right?
Yep. 5, we understand that a key component to making lasting systemic changes is diversification of the workforce. With that understanding, we want to recommend that PPS ensure that diversification of the district headquarters is not the end all. Be all, this has to come with systemic and structural change that uplifts both students and staff and color. And again, I think it's supporting what we were just talking about. And again, I don't know if anybody has comments to talk about tonight, but people can add to this. Mariah?
I think point 4 and 5 are since they're related. Yeah. Well, more importantly, do you feel that the committee has received information on this? I will have to go back and look through the PBS budget book, but I don't feel like we've received kind of information to see if there have been strides made in this area. So my suggestion here would be just to add a sentence asking for that again next year.
Okay. The next was the CBO one we talked about. And then number 7, the budget process continues to be inaccessible and non-transparent. You know, I think as new members came on board, you experienced, but I think we've put that, I think this comment is in there every year of how to make it more accessible to the public. And again, maybe we can just have a summary statement on it. Number 8, CBRC is pleased to note that Kairos receives a 95% pass-through of state funds because of its student enrollment of 50% or more of students of color. We concur with the board's action to pass through to all other charter schools 85% of state funds in 2022-23 and 90% in 23-24. And I would imagine we need to update this this for this year and into next year, or?
Yeah, I wrote
question
a comment about it. Oh, sorry, but I wrote a comment because I didn't know if we didn't discuss that in detail, if we were adding it or if it needed to, if we were removing it or it needed to be updated. So I had the same questions. We didn't talk about it really at all.
So does anybody here have more information on it, or feel that we need to highlight this or kind of roll this into where we talk about the CBOs in general?
I only know that one director on the board who happens to chair the charter committee now is disposed to fund the CBOs at 100%, but just in the same manner that other schools are funded, and but that runs contrary to what the state formula is, and I'm told, I don't know this firsthand, but is greatly has strong opposition to 100% funding. So, and I've not heard concurrence from other board members of that opinion. So.
Okay, so maybe we can roll this up into the just the conversation about the CBOs then.
Yeah, I think so.
The next was, we recommend that school improvement plans be made publicly available for each school. Equity allocations are provided to almost all schools, with plans being made to utilize those allocations to achieve desired improvements. However, those plans and the accountability for tracking outcomes are not shared externally. We must commit to measuring our progress in quantitative and qualitative ways and enter into honest, direct conversation with school communities about how we will continue to improve. For several years now, including the current proposed budget, PPS invested $140,000 in a contract with Panorama to administer school climate surveys. They haven't been made available until well after the budget is adopted. Again, do we feel like this is still something we want to highlight? And maybe people have already commented. Okay.
Well, I don't know that it's true for all schools, Lisa. A statement that says that they're not shared externally. It might be inadequate, but I know most schools put their continuous school improvement plans on the website, but you know, that takes some skill to how to access that and so on. So it's certainly not like standing on your head in the middle of I-5, but
They are available.
Well, I know they are at Franklin. I don't know whether only because I'm on that site council, but I don't know what other schools are doing.
Okay, so maybe we don't. We'll find that one out.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm fine with leaving it in there, but I'm just saying that that's my only experience.
I'm gonna speak. So I would be interested in seeing that, Roger, if you're able to send that link around, because then we could shift oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Stefan, for not seeing your hand.
Well,
but yes, if you were able to send that, so we could potentially.
For Franklin and Ilana, it's there.
Okay, then I guess I'll go look at it. And what I'm saying is that, like, we could shift this to say, like, if we are pleased with how Franklin has put it on the website, use it as an example when we're recommending.
That's fine.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Like I say, I don't know what other schools are doing. I just know from my own experience that all all the minutes and everything that the site council does and its actions and so on are all posted on the website.
My comment about this one was just, so I think this is important. I was just wondering whether it is within the scope of what we're doing, whether it's budget related.
I would say that it is budget related just because it is pertaining to like where these funds are being allocated and like being very clear with community about where those funds are being allocated and their plan, or excuse me, like how they're planning to use the funds that are allocated to them, just for transparency.
Yeah, that's helpful. So maybe that's just good to include that, right? So just make that some sort of connection clear.
Yeah, and maybe Jordan can find out for us if the contract amount that is cited in that paragraph is current. I don't know what the current contract is with Panorama.
That doesn't even seem to be the bigger point, I think. I think it's more.
Then take it out of there.
Yeah, right. No, that's what I think. I think I wouldn't focus on the amount, more so what people were just talking about, of making it transparent as to how the assigned FTE and any funds are being spent. Um, 11 was, we highly recommend the addition of student involvement and how the equity allocation of the 8% of the staffing model at targeted school funds is used at the school level. It is our observation that administrations are determining how these funds are used, and we recommend that in order to be transparent. Okay, so this kind of combines with that one as well. And maybe some of these numbers are off at this point. So I think we can include that and discuss that. So maybe some of this could be, or whoever made the comment, was it Alona? Was this, or Karanja?
Sorry, what did you say, Lisa? You broke up for a minute.
Sorry. This last one here, it looks like someone added, ask for more detail on line items. For example, testing broken out.
Oh, yes. There was a question. Sorry. We, after the meeting that we had on Tuesday, Karanja and I were talking, and he was talking about how he would like to request, I believe from PPS, that like in the future when they're putting out their budget, that they break out the line item for testing, so we know how much money is going to which areas, rather than just having it combined into one. So it's a recommendation.
Okay.
But I can email him and ask him to, or we can email him and ask him if he would like to include that moving forward. I agree with it. I think that the more breakdown, the better. I think that they combine lines too much, so it gets really blurred how much they're spending on stuff. So.
I think that's fine. I have no quarrel about that.
Okay.
I just want to make a connection. I think there's a couple of others about transparency in the budget, and I think a bigger point is that it's really hard to some sort of piece together where things go from the budget. So maybe it can be combined with I think there was a previous comment there.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And then the closing remarks, I think this is, Deshelle, I know you talked about possibly working on it, but I think some of it's going to depend on how we kind of flesh out, based on what we talked about tonight. And if people have, I think the thing we probably need to focus on is once I'll pull in all the observations and then some recommendations that have been talked about, but maybe that's where people could focus some time too, is on recommendations, specific recommendations based on the budget and the funds. And so, I don't know if anybody has further things to add, but maybe I'll just open it up to see if people have other items they think we should be including in here. And again, just it could be overriding topics, themes that we haven't talked about.
Well, I'm looking for hands raised or somebody to chime in.
And if not, if we feel like we've captured, and again, I know the budget's hard to go through and try to, I think it's good to see what rises to the top for people, particularly kind of first reaction. So what I'd propose then is for me to take what's in here and comments that have been submitted and try to put them in an order of kind of these themes, and then subsequent recommendations off of those. And I'll try to do that in the next day so that people over the weekend can come back and revisit and again, contribute toward either comments and or writing some of the narrative if people are open to that. And then we can kind of take a look at things. I mean, when is it due, Jordan? Is it Monday night or Tuesday night? I think it is.
Yeah, Tuesday.
So, I don't know if you have more to add to that, Jordan.
No, sorry.
Okay. So what would be great is if people can, again, I'll try to put this in some kind of order before the weekend hits. So tomorrow by 5. And then people can take a look at it Friday, Saturday into Sunday. I do have time to work on it Sunday. I do work on Monday. So if maybe we can have like a next checkpoint at noon on Sunday so that we can kind of flesh some things out and again, revisit Monday night before we have to finalize things, and then finalize and submit on Tuesday, if that works for people. And again, I know people have work schedules and other commitments. And so I know everybody will try to do their best within that, and I can be as flexible, but again, just trying to hit some marks here so that we can get it done. And then on the local option levy, I just updated some information that Jordan had sent, some subsequent information. So that one, if people want to take a look at, I'll just fix it to a point that people can just review it, and then we can finish that as well and get that off the plate.
So let me just be clear. Are you suggesting that we meet virtually at Sunday at noon?
No, I'm just asking that people try to, once I go through this by tomorrow at 5, that people would have Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday morning to kind of add further comments, add further narrative, focusing in on the recommendation side. And then again, I can work on editing, and maybe Deshelle, I know you had mentioned that might be, you might be available to help with kind of finalizing and wrapping up a conclusion section, and so that's kind of, I was just thinking if people could try to get their stuff in by noon on Sunday.
Well, I'd rather not try. Let's establish a deadline.
Okay, noon on Sunday. I'm trying to be nice and flexible, but I appreciate, Roger, you if everybody
Well,
can get what they can in and done by Sunday at noon.
Yeah, yes, Lisa, I'll still help with the conclusion. And then the sections that I have added comments and I can also do those. And then I'll also help with like review and editing as well.
Great.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Could I just ask Lisa, because I'd like to summarize the timeline that you just put, and I took notes on it, but I would love for it to be summarized and then sent to everyone in an email. Ideally tonight, just so we don't have folks going in. We had a few folks who left the meeting, or had a couple folks who had to leave the meeting early. So I don't know if you wanted to summarize that, and or if you would like me to do that. I'm happy either way.
Yeah, why don't I'll email you after this, Jordan, and then you can send it out to the group.
Okay.
But again, I guess that the big thing is by 5 tomorrow, I'll have cleaned up and, kind of put together a more cohesive piece. And by 5 tomorrow, people would then have Friday night, Saturday, and by noon on Sunday have kind of revisited the points and narrative and any further comments, adding recommendations. And then Deshelle and I can again work on another draft and moving towards a final Sunday into Monday. And then maybe we send out one final just overview, last comments Monday, and then we finalize Tuesday and send it over. But I'll send that to you, Jordan. So
Thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
and I do appreciate everyone who contributed comments and to the discussion tonight. And I do want to reiterate that this is a collaborative effort and that everybody's voices should be heard and that there are sometimes differing opinions, and that's okay. And I think that's kind of the beauty of community, right? That we have differing opinions, but we all can work together. And I think, for this being my final year, I've really enjoyed all the people I have met because I think everybody brings something different to the table. And I just think it's important to remember that.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa, for leading us through the discussion tonight. And are there other comments that anyone would like to make before we adjourn? Okay, if I heard correctly.
Sorry, Bailey. I couldn't find my unmute button. I just want to thank everybody for your hard work. This is not easy what you do, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the diversity of opinions. It really does help the board as we think critically about the budget and the things we need from staff to be able to vote. So thank you so much for your work.
Ailey, you weren't with us the other night when the TSCC representative made public comment, but he referenced the fact that they would be asking how the board had responded to previous reports from CBRC, and I guess CBRC would be interested in that too. So, are there any other comments? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation tonight. Thank you.